Good afternoon. We're here to announce the dropping of the constitutional repeal amendment. This will give the states rights that they anticipated they were getting in the Constitution, that they should have in the Constitution, but this will clarify how they can make use of it in the Constitution. The way that it works is that if 2/3 of the state legislators pass a resolution, the same resolution, that they can repeal regulations and laws that we do. The main consideration is for regulation. That way, unelected bureaucrats won't be able to impose things on the states that they feel is really their right, their need, and the will of the people that live in those states. So we're going to give some power back to the states, and I think this will be a very popular bill. I'll turn it over to Representative Bishop.
Thank you, Senator Enzi. We're very happy that on both houses we will drop this particular bill today. You know, there's not one good reason for this repeal amendment. There's actually 14 trillion good reasons for this repeal amendment. If one looks at the $14 trillion debt that we have today, it is in large measure simply because the check and balance system that was originally supposed to be there, not just horizontally between the three branches of government, but also between the executive, or between the national government level and the state government level, has been changed out of balance. There are many people today who revolt against the regulations and controls that are put upon them because truly this nation is too big for a one-size-fits-all system. George Mason was one of three people who spent the entire time of the Constitutional Convention and then refused to affix his signature at the end of it. Now, when I was teaching school, I always insisted my kids had to tell me, why did Mason not sign the Constitution? And of course, it was because it did not have a Bill of Rights. Why did all those other great men at the Constitutional Convention not go along with Mason? It was certainly not that they were opposed to individual liberties. It was that they had another, more effective way of controlling it rather than making a list of what the government could or could not do. And that was the structure of government that divided powers into a check and balance system. So horizontally between the three branches, but vertically between the national and the state. The last 6 decades, that national and state balance of power has been significantly eroded and unfortunately eroded. This repeal amendment, and I appreciate Dr. Randy Barnett, who is one of the intellectual sponsors of this one, this repeal amendment brings that back into balance. It does not take power from the federal government, but it allows the states to ask the federal government at some time, if they think the federal government is wrong, to rethink the issue. It's another check, another balance in the system. There is one criticism that I want to mention very quickly because it's legitimate. You could come up with 32 states which have the smallest population and only have 32% of the nation represented by their actions. And if indeed you could get Vermont and Rhode Island and Arkansas and Iowa and Wyoming and Utah and Hawaii all to agree on something, that something is wrong, the chances are something is wrong. In fact, if you can get 2/3 of the states to think that any policy decision has a problem, the chances are there is a problem, and it needs to be rethought in that particular process. 13 states have already introduced resolutions in support of this. We are working with groups like the American Legislative Exchange Council to try and work with this. I'm grateful for the sponsors who have signed on to this in the Senate. There are 14 sponsors who have signed on to this in the House. We'd like the senators to take place, the rightful place at the podium again.
We have to, in some mechanism, find a way to return to the original intent of our founding fathers, which means very limited government. And this is a very good bridge to try to send those powers back to the people. And this amendment, hopefully, will be passed into law, placed into the Constitution, will reestablish that vertical check and balance. I hear all the time up here in Washington people say that the U.S. Supreme Court is the final arbiter of the Constitution, and I hold that that's absolutely false. The final arbiter of the Constitution is the Constitution itself and what our founding fathers said about it. And they meant very strongly that the states had a say. The states have a say through this amendment process to tell us here in Washington whether we're doing the right things or not. Ardent supporter of this amendment. Encourage the American people to get behind it, encourage your senators as well as your congressmen to sign on to this bill. Let's get it passed into law. Let's start putting government back the way it should be according to our founding fathers' ideas.
This is an opportunity with this bill for us to have the states, if you get that super majority of the states in agreement on one concept, which I submit would be very difficult to do. But when that occurs, you can pretty much bet that the federal government has really stepped into something that doesn't belong to them or has created a rule that is so onerous on the states that they cannot abide by it. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over and go vote.
For too long, Washington has taken greater control over all of our people's lives. We have bureaucrats issuing regulations that have far-reaching consequences. We've witnessed literally thousands of regulations that kill jobs, hurt our economic competitiveness, and put fundamental decisions that families should be making in the hands of Washington bureaucrats and regulators. Enough is enough, in my opinion. It's time to fix this ridiculous situation where Washington thinks it knows best. That's why we're here today. This constitutional amendment would reset the balance between the federal government and the states. It would empower the states by giving them the means of overturning costly and burdensome federal regulations and requirements that have fundamentally altered our federal system of government. Providing states with a constitutionally protected way to remove the most egregious rules, regulations, and laws out of the books is just plain common sense.
Senator Enzi and I both had the privilege of serving in the Wyoming state legislature, and we know what it means to have state control, and we know what it means to have to live under rules and regulations, expensive rules and regulations coming from Washington. And that's why I'm so happy to be here today to stand with both of them and to support this piece of legislation, this amendment, because I think it's what the American people really want. Give us our country back.